Hello everyone and welcome to the second ever video on my channel, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the logger module again, but this time a different variant of it. So the last time I kind of showed you how I showed you the OOP variant of it. Now I've created another variant for procedural programming. So in Python you can use OOP or procedural, and depending on the kind of developer you are, depends on which one you're going to go for. And I wanted to have kind of different variants so that people have different options, right? So with the procedural version, there's no OOP involved, and let's just jump right in. So if we look at this main.file, it's very similar to the OOP one, except it's just slightly different. So instead of doing from logger import blah 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 blah, we're doing just import logger, so we can do logger dot and then wherever the function is. Now, it's still using kind of a state system when it comes to, not state, but instance-based, like an OOP, but it's done through procedural. So, for example, it's just, instead of an object, a class object, it's just a self-defined object. So it's like, it just returns an object, really. Like a dictionary, that's the word, dictionary in Python. So it just returns a dictionary. So we do logger.create logger, we name the logger, and it returns a dictionary and stores it inside this log variable here. Once we have that, we then just do logger.initialize logger. We pass in the instance that we want to initialize, and then we just set whether or not we want debug logging and file logging. I do, so I've done that. I've then created a second logger called mylogger2, and that's this stuff here. So basically this initializes it here. This prints all the different messages for log for the first logger, and then the second logger is this one. As you can see, they're defined by this instance here, log and log2. And if we actually run it, we get this. So it does have console logging, file logging, and database logging. Now the database is only SQLite, but I plan to make it multi-threaded plus all this other stuff with MySQL, MongoDB, all that kind of stuff, right? So let's take a look at this console then. So we kind of have the logger name here. As you can see, mylogger and mylogger2 here. And we have fatal, error, warning, success, info, debug, and trace, right? We have the same then for logger 2. So let's say we want to do something with that. Let's say we take this here. We want to copy it. Actually, you know what? Let's not copy it. Let's just straight away do it. So let's go here and do logger.set log level log and log underscore level. We're going to set to low. And if we run it, as you can see, for log level low, it just prints the error and fatal. Now, the debug and trace still print because we're in debug mode. But if we switch to production mode, you can see we don't get any debug or trace. So the debug and trace isn't based on log level, it's based on build mode. So whether it's production or debug. I plan to have 3 modes, debug, production, then release. So production is like debug version of release. It's basically release, but for development. So that we can have the actual debug version for making sure everything works, and then we test it in the production mode to test whether it's ready for release. And then the release mode is actually all the files and everything for the actual release. So we can kind of test the release through a production mode and development through debug, and then we have the actual release. But I haven't done that. I've just got debug and production at the moment, and I'm going to keep it that way probably for this project because it's quite small. Okay. So yeah, we can change log level to low. But as you can see, it doesn't affect logger 2. The reason for that is because we are only doing it on this logger, this instance, which is that one. If we change this to number 2, you can see it won't affect logger 1, it'll only affect logger 2, as you can see here, right? If we change it to production, see it a bit more clearly. I'm going to keep it in production for now, just so you can see it easier. Just fatal and error. Now, let's keep it on logger 2, but this time let's set it to medium. What happens on medium? There we go. That wasn't working. There we go. Okay, so then we get warning, error, and fatal. So if we do high, we will then get success as well, but no information. Or we shouldn't at least. And it's not working. Underscore high. I don't know why that doesn't like it when I type it, but it's fine. So yeah, we get success. Now, if we want all, then we just need to set it to all. Like that, okay? And then we get all of them, okay? And if we go back to debug, we'll always get debug and trace, no matter what we select at the log level. So I'm going to keep it to low for now. The reason for that is just so that we can make sure it's working correctly. So as you can see, we got the file path and the line number down here of where our trace is. So it just traces it back to this file. So for example, main.py, we're in main.py, and line 27, which is this here. So it's this trace message here. Pretty cool. We can trace. Awesome. So what else can we do? Well, we have these identifiers here for the logger. We have the date and time here. We have, this here, obviously, for determining whether it's a fatal error, debug, or trace, and then we have color codes for that. Now, we can also set the file path. I'm not going to do that just because I haven't got anything set up where I can change the file path to, but it does work. It is tested, it does work. Yeah. So I'm not going to kind of show this here. It's just a simple function, logger.set file path, log or log2, and then the file path, for example, logs/logs/ for example, and it would just go into a new directory. You know what? We can even test it if I just create a new folder in here really quick called logs just for testing. Then we run it and we will get all our logs put into here, as you can see, for the file. Now, the database will always be in this top logs folder here. You cannot change that. And the reason I don't want to change that, I want a central location for the database logging just to make our lives easier when it comes back to tracing it. I have some fears that if I allow the location of this to change, it could cause some permission issues or different things when writing to the database, and I don't want that. I may test it in the future and do some extensive research and testing on it to see if it is something that won't just bug out easily, but it's not something that's a high priority right now because I'm happy with it just being here. Obviously, if you wanted to change it, the source code's available on GitHub. There'll be two variants on GitHub. There'll be one for OOP, one for procedural. So I'm going to delete this now because we know it works. And if I run it now, and as you can see, we only have one logs folder, but we're saying 2 here, right? We'll get an error. Now, that is, yeah, so we'll just get an error, basically. I'm not really worried about that. Missing one required potential argument. What? Toggle. Set file toggle is missing one required potential argument. Well, that is strange. I don't know why it's throwing that error. Let's try that. Now it works. Okay. Yeah, so it's throwing a very weird error here. Not sure what's going on with that. I'll have to do some research. Set toggle file logging false. Yeah, there's some mismatch when it comes to this here. For some reason, it's affecting different function. I'm guessing I'm calling that function somewhere that is not liking. Anyways, I will fix that. That is not a problem. I think that will be a similar issue inside the OOP version. So again, if there's any bugs like this, I will go through and I will fix them. So yeah, I'm going to remove this for now because I don't really worried about it. We'll go into production. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So yeah, debug and trace is based on environment variables of debug equals 1, production equals 0, or production equals 1, debug equals 0. That's how that works, right? Okay. So I'm going to delete all these log files. That's a lot. But before I do, actually, let's open one up. And as you can see here, we simply have the same as we do here, except the difference is we have no colors, right? And that's fine, because we can't really have colors properly in here. That's not really a big issue. I want to find one with logger2. There we go. We got some log2 here. So we can see that even production works because it's not logging the debug and trace, which is pretty good. And the log level works. It's only printing fatal and error. Fantastic. Okay. So yeah, this is an example of a production run or production runtime where it's just debugging, as you can see. And it's really useful then, right? Because every instance, you just look at the date and time that you ran that instance, or the most recent anyways, and you can see what logs occurred on that date and time. And obviously, if it gets to a point where you need to keep track of logs in a file because you're storing them, you'll most likely want to use the database logging for that. But if not, and you do still want to use the file logging to track logs for debugging later on, you could just make a note of the date and time of the log file and or even copy the log file or the contents of the log file and put it wherever you need it, right? So, it's really useful for that. Okay, so let's take a look at, let's take a look at the database then, shall we? So we can log with the database. If I just open it up here, and we have a lot of logs, a lot. As you can see, my logger and my logger 2, right? So we have lots of different logs because I've run this a lot of times for testing. So I think I have deleted this log before I've started recording, so I think it's pretty much fresh, a little bit fresh anyways. Yeah, so these are all the different logs. As you can see, they just print the headers, which I can actually minimize down to here because I don't really need the file and thing right now. If I need that, I'll get that later. I do plan to create a program, by the way, that will go into these log files and log database and actually visualize this data really efficiently. If that is something you're interested in and a project that you want me to put on my list, then let me know, because that would be actually pretty interesting to create a more efficient way to actually read these logs rather than just going into the actual database viewer, such as Datagrip or SQLite viewer browser thing, some app that does it, right? That might be something interesting I could create. If you're interested in that, let me know. If you would want it to be a GUI application or just a CLI or whatever. Yeah, let me know if you're interested in that. But for now, we're going to keep it like this, pretty simple. So yeah, this works. It just prints the ID, obviously. Just minimize there. The logger name, which is my logger or my logger 2, the date and time, so the timestamp, the header, and then the message. Pretty simple, right? Really happy with this. Again, no colors. What I might have to do is add a way to format the colors. So at the moment, if I was to read, for example, the database or the file, I would have to strip out each individual header, which is the fatal, error, warning, success, and then determine the color of it. And the same with the logger, I'd have to actually get that and change the color of it. But it might be more efficient just to store the color in the files and the database. But the only problem with that then is if you open up the files to read it, it's going to look very messy, and I don't want that. So for now, what I'm thinking of doing is either making a separate library utility that will just allow me to strip down the file to automatically add the colors when I read the file. It's like my own utility for reading the log file with the colors. So it'll print it out in color format. And the same with the database, or I may add it directly in. I'm not thinking about adding it directly in just because I think that will create some problems. So I may create a separate utility library. If that's something you're interested in, let me know. Which you can just basically, just another file that you just include in your project, and it'll automatically allow you to just read the log files and print them to the console or whatever in color, rather than having to read them yourself and actually write the code and logic to add the colors in yourself. So that's something I'm thinking about doing as well. But yeah, so this is my procedural logger, which works slightly differently to my OOP, as you can see. Instead of creating a class instance, you're creating a dictionary instance by simply just calling a function, create logger, which will return a dictionary of all the different settings and configurations for each logger. I know I could have done it many different ways. I chose this way as it's personally my favorite for the way to actually write it. I wanted to write it like this and like this, just something simple. I may also add a cleanup function later that just makes sure everything is cleaned up. But right now, when I was writing the code, I just didn't need it. I was doing all my cleanup straight away after really using it because it was very minimal. So at the moment, I don't really feel the need for a cleanup function or anything like that, but I may add that later on because it may be something that's important, especially when I get into multi-threading or MySQLDB and MongoDB, that kind of stuff. That's something that I may actually need, but we will see what happens. With that said, this is my logger library. It will be available on Git. All links will be in the description if you are interested in using this. And yeah, let me know if there's any sub-projects or even other projects related to this or non-related to this that you would find interesting for me to create, and I will add it to my list. With that said, it is the end of the video, so hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned, well, yeah, I hope you learned something, how to use my actual logger. And I will see you next time. Bye!